Hey, hello. How are you? My name is Enrique Palafox. So I welcome you. I'm here with Dacre Stoker. Dacre, how are you?
Hey, Enrique, I'm doing well. I tell you, the action is picking up big time now. The story is getting to the point where crucial pieces of information are being known, and we begin to get an appearance of Quincy Morris, and that begins to open up the doors to some more information, and good and bad things are beginning to happen. But it's Dracula, so you expect this to happen.
This is crazy, and actually, you're quite right because you can feel it. The amount of posting that we are doing in Dracula's place, it's spectacular. I mean, we almost have like 12 posting in one single day. So
Yeah.
the action in the novel is very packed in these dates actually.
Yeah, no, I think, Bram has done a slow build up,
Yep.
in his writing. He's slowly built up the tension, the introduction of characters,
Yeah.
the understanding of the characters, and now it's like a frenzy. Well, we get this first idea, what's really going on behind the window shades.
Well, let me share with our friends in Spanish. Bienvenidos, esta es nuestra semana 20. Estoy aquí con Dacre Stoker en una semana súper llena de acción, porque como dice Dacre, Bram, bueno, fue construyendo la novela poco a poco, pero bueno, ahorita es cuando más se concentra, entonces estamos viendo una cantidad de publicaciones casi diarias. Entonces, bueno, vamos a entrar sin más. Ok, Dacre, let's do this.
So we start September 13th, and once again, I'm gonna cherry pick a couple of interesting things that happen until it's time to get into it. But Van Helsing is staying at the Berkeley Hotel, which is a real hotel
Yeah.
in London. Again, Bram makes everything feel like it really is.
Mhm.
But Seward and Van Helsing are actually going to visit and check in with Lucy, and they realize that yet again she's low on blood and needs some help, and so
Mhm.
they had given her the garlic, but the problem is they didn't fully explain to Mother, who was
Yep.
sick herself,
Yeah.
that you got to keep this on. They told the maids, told Lucy, you got to keep this on, and she thought she was doing right. This
Yeah.
poor sick lady, oh, I needed to open up the window and give fresh air. Oh, I thought I was doing everything right. And what in fact that does, Van Helsing is like, oh my goodness, you just messed up big time. Didn't say that because he knew she would be affected by that and maybe kill her because of her weak heart. And as he said, as Seward said, his face turned ashen gray. We knew this was trouble, and certainly it was. And they went there, and was like she was in need of transfusion. But one of the things I love is this line, where it says, we've, the devil or no devils or all the devils at once, it matters not. We must fight him all the same. We went to the hall door for his bag, and together we went up to Lucy's room. So once again, and I've been explaining to you guys my theory that Dracula is the devil. This is Bram Stoker's way of taking a mysterious, supernatural, mythological creature that's known all over the world, but turning him into some sort of immortal, Vlad Dracula, which then becomes the Count Dracula. So he's got the history of Vlad, the name of Vlad, but he is his own man. Bram's creation of the the devil incarnate. So
Yeah.
that's why we see so many references to the devil and evil and so on. And so they get up there to Lucy's room, open up the blind, and he sees that, oh my God, the window had been left open, which we all know means then the bat. It's a welcoming to the bat, and we know what the bat is, and we know what the bat is doing. Um, so I will finish just by saying I love this line by Seward right at the end, because it's like, oh my God, this is so confusing. Seward still doesn't know what's happening. Van Helsing does, but he's not
Yeah.
saying it yet.
Yeah.
But Seward says, I'm beginning to wonder, in my long habit of life amongst the insane, is this beginning to tell upon my own brain? Is he becoming a little bit insane himself? This is so much for him to understand, even as a psychiatrist, that this is happening.
Wow, ok. Estamos aquí en una disyuntiva muy interesante porque, bueno, aquí es cuando Van Helsing evidentemente se da cuenta, ¿no? Que gracias a que la mamá de Lucy no estaba consciente del peligro de quitar los ajos, ¿no? Y aquí vemos a Van Helsing pues prácticamente desesperado porque él solamente sabe que el hecho de que la señora haya retirado eso, pues dejó indefensa a su hija, ¿no? Entonces solamente lo corrobora cuando suben al cuarto y bueno, pues sí, evidentemente, pues estaba la ventana abierta. Ahora, aquí hay una dilema muy interesante porque, bueno, finalmente Bram Stoker habla de Drácula y aquí está cada vez más claro como una presencia maléfica y es la representación del diablo inclusive, ¿no? Entonces, Van Helsing es el único que sabe al respecto, ¿no? Porque inclusive Seward está muy confundido. Ahorita lo que dice Dacre es esta línea donde él se siente tan agobiado que empieza a perder un poco la razón, ¿no? Ya empieza a perder la locura él también, ¿no? Porque las cosas están yendo de mal en peor. Okay, my question is, this is quite brilliant about Bram because this was a simple accident that could happen to anyone, and it's so subtle, and it makes all the sense in the novel because if you wouldn't have this accident with the mother, I don't know which way we'll take the novel, but to have it very subtle, like, oh, my daughter is having trouble of reading, I will need to open the curtains and I mean, it's brilliant.
It is, especially when you consider something like this has to happen on 3 or 4 occasions. How does Dracula get into her room? And if you have it the same way all the time, the readers will go, oh God, not that again. Yeah. But each time, either Lucy opens up the window because she's curious about the bat flapping at the window. The mother makes a simple mistake because she thinks the fresh air is good for you. The fresh air will solve everything. Or one of the maids opens the window, or something. So he's brilliant in that each time he does this, allows this mechanism for the vampire to be allowed in, because they have to be invited in or allowed in. It can't be done by force. So some other method has to let them in. So he constantly comes up with, as you just said, very plausible and believable little errors to him, the vampire, working around the rules.
Then again, we see the realism in everything.
Yeah.
Wow. Ok, nada más rápido, una acotación. Aquí vemos un detalle genial de Bram, ¿no? Porque este es un accidente que le podría pasar a cualquiera. Entonces, que sea tan sutil, bueno, pues es parte de una narrativa creíble, como dice Dacre, ¿no? Donde, bueno, pues el vampiro tendría que ser invitado, ¿no? Y que tenga un proceso gradual. Porque si fuera siempre lo mismo, si fuera siempre el mismo método de entrar al cuarto, pues los lectores nos aburriríamos, diríamos, no, pues por aquí no va, ¿no? Pero bueno, otro detalle brillante de Bram. Ok, Dacre.
So we now have, which is interesting, even as Lucy has been affected by another blood draining, some more morphine or laudanum, we get a small entry by Lucy. And she talks about 4 days and nights of peace, of peace. Remember, this is the big theme, is nightmares and fear of sleeping, which is very close to what Bram went through himself. And I believe he projects himself when he talks about this. Since, however, Van Helsing has been with me, all this bad dreaming seems to have passed. I go to bed now without any fear of sleep. So he is, even though the bat may be flapping at the window, nobody's letting the bat in, she's okay. No more nightmares. No more fear of sleeping. I do not even try to keep awake. Now, what begins to happen is there's a hint that she wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night because she knew that Van Helsing or Seward was either sleeping in the room with her or next to her. And why is Lucy waking up even though she had some morphine? Is it because maybe she's beginning to convert? And as this possession takes over that you and I talked about last week, is this a sign that she's becoming nocturnal and she's staying awake at night, even though it's a little bit later that we see other signs? But I think that's the beginning of the hint that she is converting over to vampirism. There's no notice of it physically. Van Helsing has a pretty good idea. Seward has no idea. Lucy doesn't know what's happening. But we, the reader, have been giving subtle little hints by Bram.
And maybe she, as she started liking it, maybe she has started to embrace her fears and to start to having peace.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, in a funny way also, we know that the last time we talked, there was the mention of the swoon, that eroticism, that sexual, feeling, and maybe it is something she's accepting. Hey, this is not so bad after all,
Like it.
Sex with no strings attached, that's not bad.
Ok, aquí vemos, bueno, por otro lado, estamos viendo a Lucy, bueno, pues ya cada vez su caída más fuerte, ¿no? Aquí ella habla de 4 días de paz, ¿no? Porque recordemos que, bueno, las pesadillas, ¿no? Son algo terrible. Ya habíamos platicado las semanas anteriores de la cuestión de posesión, ¿no? Entonces, cuando llega la posesión, ella empieza a tener estos terrores terribles. Pero bueno, finalmente ahorita lo que hablábamos es que quizá ella también lo empieza a disfrutar, porque bueno, finalmente, con el paso del tiempo, ¿no? Ella, justo lo hablábamos la semana pasada, con estas como excitaciones que tiene sexuales, ¿no? De repente quizá puede ser que le empiece a gustar, entonces por lo tanto también hay un tema de paz. Entonces ella ya habla continuamente de ya las pesadillas ya quedaron atrás, quizá también porque tiene a Van Helsing durmiendo al lado o al doctor Seward. Entonces cualquiera de los casos, ella está en paz en este momento. Okay.
So the action now shifts to something very realistic, and that is the London Zoo. And Bram introduces a newspaper article from the Pall Mall Gazette. It says, watch out, this black wolf has escaped. So there's an interview with the guy, Thomas Bilder. Thomas Bilder, I'm not sure if it's a real name. Funnily enough, it sounds a little bit like maybe Bleeder or something. Who knows if that's subtle, but it sounds like, and I can tell you for a fact, Bram Stoker has written newspaper articles. This sounds a lot like a newspaper article, a real one, where you got to pay the guy some money and you got to get information. And the guy has a very strange accent, which Bram was really big on dialects to get them right. So it's not easy to read it, but I really encourage you guys to read this slowly, even if it's in a different language or dialects. You get the idea that this man really loves his animals. He loves the wolves. And there's even some cool humor, which not a lot of people give Bram Stoker a lot of credit for his dry Irish wit. Because at the end of this, as they've been talking about, did you see anything strange? He goes, yeah, there was a one man here, a tall, thin chap with a hook nose and a pointed beard and a few white hairs running through it. And he joked about, would the wolf eat him? He says, well, he likes a good bone or two, and you have to see some of those, but there's not a lot of meat there. And then he goes on to say, why do you think that the wolf berserker got out? Oh, I've got my theory why he wants to get out. He just wanted to get out, which again is kind of dry humor when the newspaper guy is like, well, was he going to run all over London and eat little children?
No.
But it's obviously it's a very serious part of the story. But Enrique, I've got to ask you, it presents to me a dilemma that we need to discuss. And I want to see what your opinion is, because here are the facts: that this wolf has gotten out of the zoo. Apparently it's going around London for a couple of days and nights, and it's black. But the guy being interviewed, Mr. Thomas Bilder, from the zoo says that one of the gardeners saw either a gray dog or a gray wolf. And then we find out that the bars of the cage were bent open, which obviously the wolf itself couldn't do.
The Dracula with the force. Mm-hmm.
Most likely Dracula. In what form? We'll get to that. I want your opinion. And then just afterwards, this is during the time when Lucy is now got the garlic around her neck, got the protection. The window has now been closed and repaired. So we know that when Seward and Van Helsing go back, a gray wolf has broken the window, because we know from the memorandum that Lucy left, Gray Wolf broke the window, and then Lucy had another blood draining. So part of the superstitions and the rules of Dracula entering into her room only if he is invited, is it possible that the Gray Wolf was asking his friend, the Black Wolf, the Berserker, using him as a helper? The Black Wolf breaks the window, but the Gray Wolf is Dracula after all. So what do you think? This is a big dilemma that we need to sort of try to decide.
It definitely confused me, because having two animals of the same kind, of the same color, in the same area, it kind of be confusing for me. Actually, in my mind, the wolf that opened, that breaks into Lucy's bedroom was Dracula himself. But I was wrong, because as you actually just said it, that there are rules, and if you can see it on a certain perspective, you can see, as you just mentioned, this gradually increments of tryings of to get into Lucy. So the first ones were very simple or by accident, but now that each precaution has been taken care of, now he needs an assistant. So Renfield, he is not able to assist him. So maybe he went to the zoo to get rid of the to get free of the wolf, and he commands himself to enter into the room.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think the masterful thing Bram Stoker did is create an ambiguous situation where you're not sure, but you have a feeling there's something supernatural going on. And what you and I are doing are trying to analyze it, maybe more than Bram did himself. Who knows? Maybe Bram meant to have it as, okay, Black Wolf is Berserker, Gray Wolf is Dracula, one needs the other. Maybe he's thinking that. But the cool thing is, 123 years later, we're still interested, and we're still trying to figure out what exactly happened. But what we do know, that Lucy got another involvement with Dracula, another draining, and now things are getting really serious from her perspective, where the experts are getting called in, and we're going to see more soon. But just before we do, why don't you translate that, and we'll talk about what happens before the stakes are raised with poor old Lucy. Talk about our Black and our Gray Wolf.
Aquí tenemos una discusión interesante, porque estamos un poco tratando de analizar varios puntos de vista, porque hay una zona que es un poco gris, una zona gris donde está un poco confuso entre el lobo negro y el lobo gris que se mencionan en la novela. Por un lado está esta persona, ¿no? que Bram evidentemente se ve que él escribió este relato como si fuera un artículo de periódico, como muchos de los que él escribió, ¿no? Pero precisamente en el relato dice que hay una figura humana, ¿no? Que es la que estuvo cerca del lobo del zoológico antes de que ésta se liberara. Entonces, esto causa un poco de escándalo, ¿no? Y genera que se reporte en los periódicos, y esa es un poquito esta discusión que tiene Dacre y la trae aquí un poco, bueno, ¿quién es cuál es el lobo? ¿Es Drácula el que entra o en realidad es esta manipulación que tiene Drácula sobre el lobo y que necesita un ayudante para, respetando el folclore, entrar al cuarto? Ok, okay, let's continue with this because it's kind of yeah, it's confusing because in my mind, Dracula can easily transform himself into a black wolf, but no, actually there are two different wolves in the novel, and it's quite a interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe you find something in your researches.
Well, I haven't found anything, other than he's chosen gray wolf and a black wolf, which I think brings up, and then of course it's a black dog that jumps off the ship in Whitby, or what looks like one in the nighttime.
Either way, sorry to interrupt you. Either way, it's a representation of the devil again, because in the Middle Ages, black cats, black dogs, black wolves are a clear representation of the devil. So either way, it's him or the manifest of the devilish things happening.
Yeah. So Dr. Seward is having a difficult time at this stage. He's confused. He's getting very tired. He's thinking maybe he's going insane. He goes back to his asylum and has a very interesting and strange, uncharacteristic experience with our friend Renfield. And it might be, Enrique, because Renfield actually somehow escaped from his cell and came into the office of Seward with a knife and actually cut Seward. So you wonder the possession that Dracula has over Renfield at this time, while Dracula is frustrated that he cannot get easily into Lucy's room and he has to elicit the help from the wolf. Was he maybe trying to get Renfield to help him in, and that's how Renfield escaped? Who knows? Because if he can get a wolf out of a zoo, he can certainly get Renfield out of an asylum. Definitely. But nonetheless, Renfield attacks Seward and cuts him badly. And it actually creates a situation with one of the most famous lines in the novel, when Seward is cut, and then for some reason, Renfield is attracted to the blood, lies on the floor and starts licking up the blood. And he says, "The blood is the life. The blood is the life." And boy, oh boy, is that, iconic in popular culture. But it also tells us, much like Lucy, the possession is staging up to be something more serious. Actual drinking of the blood of Renfield is obviously more than just eating flies and bugs. He's drinking human blood, the highest level, of beings is humans, and he's drinking it now. So that's pretty significant change, and luckily nothing worse to Seward, because we need him for the rest of the story. But quickly the attendants come in and grab Renfield and put him back in the cell.
Okay. Y vemos también estos intentos de Drácula quizá por liberar, por entrar con lo de Lucy. Entonces, por un lado está la parte del lobo, pero por el otro lado también está Renfield. Entonces, quizá también este intento de escape de Renfield, bueno, pues son estos intentos del conde de llevar una ayuda, ¿no? Para poder llegar hacia Lucy. Entonces, aquí vemos cómo Renfield se escapa y ataca físicamente en la oficina al doctor Seward, lo cual le hace una herida grave, ¿no? Y que finalmente no pasa nada, pero bueno, sí es una herida grave. Y bueno, tenemos que ver eso, ¿no? Porque aquí, como dice Dacre, se da algo para la cultura popular que es muy importante, que es esta frase lapidaria, que es "la sangre es la vida", ¿no? Porque cuando lo corta y cae la sangre al piso, Renfield se tira y le empieza a lamer en una escena sumamente fuerte y sumamente icónica, ¿no? Para la cultura popular, insisto, dejando que ya hay una escalada en este consumo de vida, ¿no? Porque bueno, si empezó con moscas y luego era arañas y luego era pájaros y demás, ahora ya llegó al ser humano, que es lo más alto en la escala de consumo animal. Ok.
So I'm going to say this part, and then again, I want your opinion on the literary device that Bram is using, because I think it's brilliant. This memorandum from Lucy, she's not writing in a diary, she's not sending a letter to Mina. She does something she hasn't done before. She realizes now something really bad is happening, and she wants to make sure that she records what has happened so that Seward and Van Helsing know. And so she writes down the events of what had happened when the gray wolf came in and, of course, turned into Dracula. And sadly, her mother dies during the whole process, and folds up this note and sticks it inside her, next to her breast, so it will be found if she dies. And it's powerful. It's really powerful. But she also says, I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me. And my dear mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. So again, we now get something a little bit different from the Count, that he has maybe used this mesmerism, this ESP, this spell on her. She couldn't move. She had to just lie there and have the blood exchange, which is, we've kind of thought that happened before, but this is the first time we see it, because this is the first-hand account of a victim of vampirism in this story. Yeah. What do you think about the way this Bram chose to tell us this?
I mean, then again, he chose Lucy to have a voice of this phenomena, and this is very interesting because we can actually can have a glance of what's happening inside the house, the horrors that's happening in the house, which builds all the horror in the novel, because this feels real. This is Lucy telling her fears for whatever can find her if she dies. So yeah. The reason for her to hide the note, it's very impressive, because you actually told us several weeks ago that for a doctor to have access to a female body was very restricted. So this is actually, again, like a very private thing, like a code almost.
You're right, it is. And later on we find that this is privileged information, that she actually tears it up later because she doesn't want it to be known, which kind of is like, now the full possession is taken over. She can't give any more secrets to these guys. She made a mistake, but she did it while she was still mostly human, mostly natural. And then she crosses that threshold, becomes supernatural, and has to tear it up.
Okay. Okay, let's translate this. Bueno, viene una parte también interesante porque Lucy ahora deja un memorando. Este memorando es para dejar muy claramente, como dice Dacre, es la primera vez que vemos la parte de la vampirización, un caso de vampirización escrito en la novela como tal desde el punto de vista de Lucy, porque recuerden que Lucy es la que nos da la voz a todo esto que está pasando, que es aterrador. Y bueno, finalmente hay un tema de confidencialidad, ¿no? Porque, bueno, ella esconde el papel en su pecho, ¿no? Sabiendo que nadie va a poder tener acceso a él hasta que ella muera, ¿no? Porque, bueno, pues es cuando ya los doctores podrían revisar esa parte. Pero como dice Dacre, después, ¿no? Más adelante, pues ya cuando está completamente convertida y completamente poseída, bueno, pues entonces ahí ya se da cuenta del error y entonces trata de regresar, ¿no? Algo que Van Helsing cubre. Okay.
So after this horrible experience that we hear about in the memorandum, we realize that the band of heroes are coming together, and this is where all the forces end up combining, where we have Seward and Van Helsing, and we get to see Quincy Morris and Arthur. They are descending upon Hillingham, and they actually have to break into the place and actually have to use a surgical saw to cut through some of the bars in the window to get in, because the place is locked up. obviously other than the window that was broken into up on the higher level. But it really begins to take shape, and it really is a very interesting section when once again, for instance, when Van Helsing comes in and he sees that she's in really bad shape and not a lot of heartbeat and breathing. Oh, bring the brandy. It seems to be the alcohol is always the salvation before the drugs and the antibiotics and these things. It's bring the brandy, and gives her brandy, puts the brandy in her wrist, and that alcohol was very cleansing. And I told you that even when people were bloodlet, they would take out the blood and they'd put in red wine, to help cleanse. And whenever the poor ladies, the maids were overcome, oh, gotta give them some sherry or brandy. But on a more serious note, what you've got now is Quincy Morris. After the need for another transfusion is determined by Van Helsing, we must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon or the poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. And so Van Helsing says, come on, what can we get? And Arthur, Quincy Morris, he actually volunteers his blood. And he says, a brave man's blood is the best thing on earth when a woman is in trouble. And then again, you're a man, and make no mistake, when the devil may work against us, all he's worth, but God sends us when we want them. Very chauvinistic. We'll learn later on that Mina is really the glue that keeps us together. But by golly, it's men's blood we need, and a good American blood. So this is important because he volunteers his blood. But more important, a little bit later, he volunteers some very important information. And that information is that when he was in South America, he recognized the presence of the vampire bat taking the blood out of his horse. Yeah. As I say in my Stoker on Stoker presentations, this information Bram got right from an article from the New York World newspaper in 1896 about the New England vampire scare, and it mentions Charles Darwin in South America. Almost word for word is used from Darwin and put into Quincy Morris's mouth. Darwin says, when I was in South America, these vampire bats came out of the trees and would drink the blood from cattle. And Morris says, yes, in South America, it takes the blood from horses. So it's connecting the natural world with the supernatural world right there. And right here, it's this American guy that does it. It's very important that this is the first time Van Helsing knows about it, but it's Quincy Morris that says, it's like a vampire bat that I saw in South America.
He made the connection, ya. Okay. Aquí interesante porque, bueno, ya se empiezan a juntar los héroes, se empieza a juntar ya el relato, los héroes empiezan a llegar a Hillham, ahí está Lucy, recordemos que está tanto el Dr. Seward como Van Helsing, pero también llegan Arthur y llega Quincy. Entonces, Arthur ya está un poco exhausto, ¿no? Por la transfusión que ya hizo. Entonces, de repente, Quincy se voluntaría y dice, yo doy la sangre. Entonces, Van Helsing hace exaltación, ¿no? De que, claro, lo que necesita esta muchachita, bueno, pues es poderosa sangre de un aventurero, ¿no? Que la venga a rescatar. Es muy, pues no sé, muy de la literatura, ¿no? Entonces, de repente vemos no nada más eso, que es importante a Quincy, sino que realmente aquí es el primero que hace la conexión con el vampiro, porque si bien sabemos que Van Helsing ya sabe, ¿no? Y él lo tiene, pero él hasta este momento no lo ha expresado. Y es Quincy, ¿no? Que aludiendo precisamente a who was the quote? Sorry about that.
Charles Darwin.
Okay. Una de las viajes de Charles Darwin que hizo hacia Sudamérica, entonces tiene una cita que habla de los vampiros, cómo bajan a beber sangre del ganado, y que precisamente es casi palabra por palabra lo mismo que dice Quincy, pero en vez de ganado habla de su caballo. Entonces Quincy se convierte en una parte muy importante porque es el que hace realmente la conexión entre todos de que hay algo sobrenatural por acá. Okay.
So to sort of wind this down now, there is some brilliant writing here with a lot of loose ends that Bram Stoker had to tie together. Mm-hmm. Number one, the mother died. She mm-hmm. had a weak heart. But was there any marks on her body? Is it possible that Dracula came in and took some of her blood as well, took some of her soul? Who knows? But there's a dead body. And Van Helsing has the strength of mind, along with Seward, to say, we've got to get a death certificate. Otherwise, there will be an inquiry. And the last thing in the world these guys want is to try to explain what's happening to Lucy to the authorities. So what happened to the mother is just as serious. So Van Helsing tells Seward, you've got to sign a death certificate. We know the coroner. We'll go and tell him. Everything will be sort of quiet. We'll just take care of it. And then the final one is to really end this segment. And I'm gonna read this, and you need to translate just like I say it, because it's the feeling we end with just before we get a letter from Mina saying, "Oh, Lucy, how are you? Is everything okay? Finally, me and Jonathan, things are okay, and he's made a partner, and so on. This is all." But just before that, the big shock comes. We've already had Morris tell us that it's like the vampires. He saw the bats, but an observation of Lucy, her open mouth showed the pale gums drawn back from the teeth, which look positively longer and sharper than usual. This, besides her pale skin, is the first physical appearance of the vampirism. And that's the thought we end with.
Which is very taken from the folklore tradition, who has the teeth from the gums retracting. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, aquí tenemos muy interesante ya. Vienen cuestiones otra vez de realismo, ¿no? Porque por un lado están sucediendo todo esto con Lucy, ¿no? Y está Quincy, Van Helsing y demás, pero por el otro lado hay un cadáver, el cadáver de la mamá que acaba de morir, ¿no? Por este ataque al corazón, y que bueno, pues ellos otra vez en este realismo que impregna Bram en toda la novela, ellos no quieren tener a la policía ahí, ¿no? Porque bueno, pues no quieren dar explicaciones de qué le pasó a la mamá y mucho menos de qué le está pasando a Lucy, sobre todo en la condición tan frágil en la que está. Entonces, aquí, bueno, pues viene otra vez la manipulación de las cosas precisamente para llevarlo a otro lado, ¿no? Y vemos aquí cómo la pérdida de sangre, bueno, ya tiene que ver con una cuestión sobrenatural. Okay.
So, as I said, we end with that shocker, and then a nice letter comes from Mina to Lucy, not knowing that she's not going to be able to read it or understand it, but it's at least we, the readers, are checking in, and we know Mina and Jonathan are okay. They're on their way back, and we now have Mina on the good side to help later on help figure out this problem.
And actually, another brilliance of Bram is to write it this subtlety unopened by Lucy.
Yes.
Yeah, that is very important, because we can now understand that Lucy is almost gone, and as you just said, the good news from Mina just arrived sometime so late.
Yeah.
Okay. Aquí sorry, let me.
No, yeah. Say that. Go ahead.
Okay, let me translate this because I will lose the point. Aquí lo que vemos es una carta sin abrir de Mina, ¿no? Que bueno, ya viene de regreso ya con Jonathan y viene contando buenas noticias, ¿no? Porque le está contando a su amiga, ¿no? De que todas estas cosas ya le iban a pasar, pero desgraciadamente Lucy no la ve. Y aquí otra vez Bram Stoker nos deja otro de esos detalles finísimos donde dice que esta es una carta que no abre ella, ¿no? Y que es leída después por el grupo. Ok, sorry.
What I wanted to ask you, your opinion, and also for the readers, when Dracula is translated into Spanish,
Mhm.
how do the translators manage to deal with the dialect, for instance, of the zookeeper who has this very, I'm not sure if it's a Yorkshire accent or what it is. How do they deal with that when they translate into Spanish language?
It's not as appropriate as I would like, but it's kind of a slang. But you need to understand that the first traduction in Spanish was in Spain in, I believe it was 1935 or something. So it was very late into the development of the novel. So which the actual translated is one of the abridged editions. And the Spanish from Spain, it's so different from the Spanish from Mexico and from Latin America, and they change everything. So I can tell you that in Mexico, there is no precise tracking of this kind of translations, because mostly are translated from another translator, and it's a curious slang, but it's definitely not as polished as Bram intended.
Well, because I just wondered, I want to encourage people to really read that section about the interview with Thomas Builder, the zookeeper, because it's a different element of Bram's writing, but it is so Bram Stoker himself with a little humor mixed in
Yeah.
and important information.
Yeah.
So it's a good piece worth rereading just to get the full value from it.
Okay, let me tell them. Aquí importante, Dacre nos recomienda leer sobre todo en español, bueno, leer esta parte que hace más bien en inglés Bram, porque Bram hace un juego muy interesante, ¿no? De juego de palabras cuando entrevista por ejemplo, al del zoológico, porque habla un slang que es muy realista, que cuando se hizo al español, bueno, pues se ha perdido. Acuérdense que en español el tema del copyright se ha hecho una traducción de la traducción de la traducción, entonces se ha perdido, ¿no? Como una fuente de esto. Entonces, cuando se lee en español, se lee como un pequeño slang, pero no es con lo pulido que hace Bram. Ok.
Other than that, have a good week. Keep the light on, read the book, and I hope you don't have nightmares. We'll see you in a week.
Thank you so much, Dacre. It was quite a week, and next week it's going to be the busting, or I don't know. It's going to be a blast. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Gracias por estar con nosotros. La siguiente semana va a ser espectacular, es tremenda. No se la pierdan. Y bueno, pues por aquí nos vemos la siguiente semana. Muchísimas gracias. Hasta pronto. Bye bye. Okay.